We're going to talk about the phonatory system today. We've covered so far the respiratory system. We've talked about the skeletal framework of the respiratory system. We've talked about the muscles of inspiration and expiration. We've covered the physiology of respiration. If you remember when we talked about the physiology of respiration, we talked about how the air source from the lungs serves as a means of pressure, subglottic pressure, to open up your vocal folds and then close your vocal folds. Now, these vocal folds are something that forms part of this system, which is your phonatory system. Okay, this what you see right here is called the larynx. This forms your anterior portion of the neck right here. So if you start feeling your neck around here, what you're going to feel is your larynx. And in layman term, it's called the voice box. Okay, so this is what we're going to discuss today, the phonatory system. So the larynx is an unpaired midline musculocartilaginous structure. As I said, it's located in the anterior. So if I put this, obviously that's too big. If you take this, look, it sits right here in the anterior portion of your neck. What are the landmarks of this structure? If you remember, we talked about trachea, which is one of the passageways in our skeletal framework of the respiratory system. The inferior portion of your larynx is going to be your trachea, so which means your larynx sits right on top of the trachea. Your superior structure is called the hyoid bone right here from where your larynx suspends. Okay? And this location is about the 3rd to 6th cervical vertebrae. So if you talk about your cervical vertebrae, it's right here. The first set of vertebrae that you see are the cervical vertebrae. And so your larynx is between the 3rd and 6th cervical vertebrae. Of course, the cervical vertebrae is in the back, but your larynx is the front. So it's in the position of the 3rd to 6th cervical vertebrae. It may vary with age, the position where it is, with gender. So males usually have a higher level of larynx compared to the females. And with the laryngeal activity. When you're, what kind of activity you do? When you swallow, you elevate it and then you drop it down. Okay. So this is another picture of where your larynx is located. If you can see right here, that's your hyoid bone. This is where your larynx is and your trachea sits right there. So this what you see right here is the small structure. It looks pretty large on your model, but it's really a tiny structure. And what you see right here is the larynx. This is another depiction of where it is. You're looking at the location in your anterior portion of the neck. So if you extend your neck, and I want you to kind of feel right here through down here, this portion is going to be your larynx. Okay. Now you can see some of the structures right here, and we're going to talk about this. What you see here is the hyoid bone. What you see here is the thyroid cartilage. And then what you see below here is cricoid cartilage. These are parts of the larynx, and we're going to talk about these parts of the larynx in just a minute. Okay. Before we talk about parts of the larynx, why is this laryngeal system important? Why do we need to talk about the phonatory system? How does this help us? The main biological function of the larynx. So you talk about the function of the larynx. There is a biological function of the larynx and a non-biological function of the larynx. Biological function of the larynx is important for us to survive because it serves as a protective mechanism for the respiratory tract. So think about this. You have your respiratory system that sits right there, and then your larynx sits on top of it. Your vocal folds have to stay open in order for you to breathe in and breathe out. But say, for example, you're eating something and you choke. What is the first thing that you do as a reflux in your body? What do? You cough, right? So if there's something that's going in your body and you choke, you cough. When you cough, you expel that foreign body outside. That's the mechanism, that's the function of this larynx. The vocal folds have to close, trigger your cough, and you get that substance out. It also prevents any dust or anything going into your system. So it's an important function of it is the protective mechanism. Another mechanism that you generally do every day, a gross mechanism, your bowel movement. You need to build pressure to use your bowel movement. That's what your larynx does too. Or anything to lift weight. If you are lifting a heavy box, how do you get that grunting pressure that you build? Your vocal folds have to close. Okay, so your vocal folds serve very important function the larynx serves. One is it serves as a protective mechanism. It has to close when it has a threat from a foreign body. And the next thing is it coughs out that foreign body. Anything for weight bearing, anything to close, anything for your bowel movement, anything that you need to do a pressure building or a weight bearing, you need to close your vocal folds. And finally, the most important thing, it transports air in and out of the lungs where the vocal folds have to stay open. Now, without this, you're going to have difficulty without the larynx. But doesn't mean you can't live without the larynx, because there are people that have had their larynx removed because of laryngeal cancers, and it's called laryngectomy, and they can still lead a normal life. Okay? So the larynx is an important function, but you have to adapt the way you do certain things, adapt the way you breathe, where your breathing mechanism is, where your coughing mechanism is. That varies with laryngectomy. Now, I think the focus for us is, what are the non-biological functions of using the larynx? The main function is going to be your speech production. This is what the focus of this entire course, and you being a minor in speech language pathology, this is what we need to know, is what is the principal function is this larynx helps us in speech production. Remember when we talked about the minimum subglottic pressure that is required to close your vocal folds and get it to open, move your vocal folds apart? That is the pressure that is required to initiate phonation, meaning I need so much pressure to get my vocal folds to open, and then this vocal fold will tend to start vibrating, which is what produces a sound source. So let's talk about this for a second. I'm going to take my head, I'm going to keep it aside. All I have is only my lungs and my larynx. Okay? And anytime I have air from my lungs come up to my larynx and my vocal folds vibrate or come into close contact, it goes bzz, bzz, bzz. That's all the sound you get at the level of the vocal folds. What converts into a speech sound is when I add this head back, when you see all my articulators and I move my lips, my tongue, and my palate, all of those is what converts it into speech sounds. So our focus is to be able to say that these vocal folds aid us in speech production, aid us in the sound source. If we didn't have the vocal folds, the sound source is going to be missing. Okay. Now, why is the sound source important? There are two sets of sounds that we will be talking about when we talk about the physiology of phonation. They're going to be the voiced sounds and voiceless sounds. What are voice sounds? Voice sounds are sounds that brings your vocal folds together and they vibrate. Something like zzz, those are sounds that require the vibration of your vocal folds. So if you take your hand, place it on your neck, and I want you to go zzz, and I want you to feel the vibration on your vocal folds. Now, voiceless sounds are sounds where your vocal folds are open. So I want you to place your hand in your neck, and I want you to go like a hissing sound of the snake, and then go zzz, zzz, zzz. And I want you to alternate the two sounds and see that one sound you're going to have vibration of the vocal folds, and one sound you're going to have open vocal folds. So it's very important to have this larynx for us for speech production. Okay. Having said that, let's talk about what are the structures involved in the larynx. So the key structures, I'm just going to start pointing out here, is you have the hyoid bone right here, you have the thyroid, you have the cricoid, and you can see the arytenoids here, and this is where your tracheal rings are. So your tracheal rings, your larynx sits on top of your tracheal ring. Okay? That's just anterior side view. So if I were to stand like this, and I show you my larynx, you're looking at this side of the larynx on that picture. This is the larynx from behind. What you see here is the epiglottis. Epiglottis has to close when you're eating. Typically, your epiglottis closes when you eat so that food doesn't go into your windpipe, which is your trachea. Then you have, again, this is where you're seeing the cricoid cartilage properly. And then these are your tracheal rings. Remember, the tracheal rings are open posteriorly. If this is the back of your tracheal ring, it's open. It allows for expansion and contraction of your trachea when you breathe in and breathe out. So when we talk about the framework of the larynx, this what you see right here, the structure up here, is your hyoid bone. Okay? We talked about the superior part of your larynx is the hyoid, where the larynx suspends from. The inferior is your trachea, right? The posterior is actually your esophagus. Okay. Now, if you look at this structure, this is the hyoid bone. It's a U-shaped bone. Okay. The larynx suspends from this bone. The rest of the larynx suspends from this bone. It serves as a point of attachment for a lot of the muscles. And we will talk about extrinsic muscles of the larynx. We'll talk about some tongue muscles. This hyoid bone serves as a point of attachment for those muscles. So hold on to that thought. All I want you to remember right now is the hyoid is a bone from where the larynx suspends. It's a U-shaped bone, horseshoe or U-shaped bone. Okay. It serves as a point of attachment for lots of muscles. This is the only bone in our entire body where I think we have about 236 bones, if I'm not wrong, or 276, one of those two numbers. This is the only bone in the body that is not attached to any other bone. This is a bone that just suspends by itself. Okay? And it's bound in position by muscles and ligaments. These are some of the ligaments we'll be talking about. So to reiterate, this is a U-shaped, horse-shaped bone. Okay? What are the parts of this bone? You have the corpus or the body. This front part that you see right here is the corpus or the body of the hyoid. Then you have the greater horns of the hyoid, which is this structure right here behind that you see is the greater horns of the hyoid. It serves as a point of attachment for the thyroid cartilage. We'll be talking about the thyroid cartilage in just a minute. So you have the corpus and you have the greater horns, which serves as a point of attachment for the thyroid cartilage. Those are your important landmarks of the hyoid bone. This hyoid bone, if you see, is at the level of the third cervical vertebra. So if I keep this in the neck here, this one, the posterior part will be your third cervical vertebra. So it's high in the neck. Okay. Now, we talked about the hyoid bone, which serves as a main bone from where your larynx suspends. We talked about, remember how the larynx is a musculocartilaginous structure? So let's talk about some of the cartilages that are part of our larynx. Some of the cartilages they can be divided into paired cartilages and unpaired cartilages. Unpaired cartilages meaning there is only one cartilage. Paired cartilages meaning there are two cartilages. Okay. The unpaired cartilages are two. One is the thyroid cartilage, which what you see right here, this broad base cartilage right here is your thyroid cartilage. The second one is your cricoid cartilage that you see right here. Okay, so you have your thyroid and your cricoid cartilage. These are two unpaired cartilages. The paired cartilages are three, but I want you to just kind of see only the one cartilage that we're going to talk about is your arytenoid cartilages. The one that I'm rocking right here, these two cartilages right here, those are your arytenoid cartilages. So the focus of this class, we're going to talk about two unpaired cartilages, the thyroid and the cricoid, and one paired cartilages, which is the arytenoid. Okay. You need to know the other names of the paired cartilages, which are the corniculate and the cuneiform cartilages. Okay. So if you look at here, we're looking at this structure right here. This is your thyroid cartilage, one side of the thyroid cartilage. Some of the landmarks of the thyroid cartilage, what you see, this big structure right here, is your thyroid lamina. Okay. This prominence that you see here, which is called the laryngeal prominence, is nothing but the Adam's apple in men. If you feel your neck and if you feel that pointed laryngeal prominence that you see, it's more prominent in men than women, is going to be the Adam's apple. And that's what you see right here. Okay, this structure that you see right here is the Adam's prominence or the laryngeal prominence. The structure that you see on either side of the thyroid cartilage is the thyroid lamina. This is the largest of all the cartilages that you can see in the larynx. It's like a shield. If you touch it, if you feel, obviously, in your neck, you can't feel it as much as I'm feeling it right here. And this obviously is not a cartilage, right? This is a model. So this is the largest of the cartilages. It's like a shield. So as I said, this is a lamina that converge together to form a prominence there. It's called the thyroid notch or the laryngeal prominence or the Adam's apple. See, it's got three different names. Now, the other two structures that I want you to see are the superior horn and the inferior horn. Okay, the superior horn serves as a point of attachment to your greater horn of the hyoid. Okay, the greater horn of the hyoid has an attachment with the superior horn of the thyroid cartilage. The inferior horn of the thyroid cartilage serves as a point of attachment to the cricoid cartilage. Okay, let's think about this. So far we've talked about the hyoid bone. The landmarks of the hyoid bone, it's a U-shaped structure. This is the corpus of the hyoid. The greater horn of the hyoid attaches to the superior horn of the thyroid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage is an unpaired cartilage. It has the right and left thyroid lamina, it comes together to meet and form an angle called the thyroid notch or the Adam's apple or the laryngeal prominence. Okay. It has the superior horn and the inferior horn. The superior horn attaches to the hyoid. The inferior horn attaches to the cricoid cartilage. Okay. That's what it says right here. The superior horn attaches to the hyoid bone. The inferior horn articulates with the cricoid cartilage. There is an oblique line that you can see right here, which you can see as a line, but that's where it is. It serves as a point of attachment for most of the muscles that are attaching to the thyroid cartilage. Okay, that's called the oblique line on each lamina on either side. So far so good. We've got hyoid, which is the only bone that's in the body that suspends from where the larynx suspends, that is not attached to any other bone. Then we talked about the thyroid cartilage. The next cartilage we're going to talk about is the cricoid cartilage. What you can see here, the cricoid cartilage is actually like a signet ring. So if you see here, the anterior part, this is the anterior part of the neck, remember? The front is the anterior, the back is the posterior. The front of the neck, it's very narrow, and as the cricoid cartilage goes to the back of the posterior part, it broadens and becomes the bigger cartilage. Okay? This is the only complete cartilaginous ring in the respiratory passageway. Why am I saying that? If you look at the trachea right here, which is below, the trachea is incomplete. The tracheal rings do not close on the posterior aspect because it allows for expansion and compression of the thorax. Of your laryngeal passageway. But if you look at the cricoid, it's a complete cartilaginous ring in the back. The posterior is closed. So if I ask you the only complete cartilaginous ring in the respiratory passageway, you should be able to say the cricoid cartilage. The cricoid cartilage sits right immediately above the tracheal ring. The communication between the trachea and the cricoid cartilage is by a cricotracheal membrane. Okay? So if you see, this is your cricoid cartilage, this is your first tracheal ring. The connection between your cricoid cartilage and your thyroid is going to be by means of a cricotracheal membrane. So this lies in front of the sixth cervical vertebra. So remember we talked about the position of your larynx. It's between the third and the sixth cervical vertebra, and it can vary with age, with gender, and with the laryngeal activity you're doing. So if hyoid forms the superior portion of your larynx, if that's at the third cervical vertebra, your cricoid forms the inferior portion of your larynx, and that's at the level of the sixth cervical vertebra. And below that starts your respiratory structure, the trachea. All right? What are the parts of the cricoid? The parts of the cricoid are this part, which is complete in the back. It's called the posterior quadrate lamina. Okay, this whole structure, these are the muscles, and if you take away the muscle, that's the entire cricoid cartilage. That cartilage is, that portion is called the posterior quadrate lamina. It's a point of articulation of the arytenoid cartilages. So if you see right here, these two structures are your arytenoid cartilages. They sit right on top of the posterior quadrate lamina. Okay. And then they have an anterior arc right here. That's the anterior arc, what you see on either side. Then what you see on either side, which you don't see well on this side, what you see on this side is the lateral articular facets, which is a point of attachment of the thyroid cartilage with the cricoid cartilage. Okay, so the three parts of the cricoid is the posterior quadrate lamina, which serves as a point of attachment for the arytenoid cartilages, the anterior arc in the front, and then the articulating facets, which are on the lateral side, which serves as a point of attachment for your inferior horn of the thyroid cartilage to the cricoid cartilage. Okay, and then we talked about the cricotracheal membrane, which is a point of attachment for your cricoid cartilage and the first tracheal membrane. So we talked about two unpaired cartilages, the thyroid cartilage and the cricoid cartilage. The thyroid is the biggest of the cartilages. It kind of forms like a shield. It's in the anterior portion of the neck. You have a thyroid lamina on each side. It comes together to join to form the laryngeal prominence or the Adam's apple. And then it has the superior horn and the inferior horn. The superior horn is a point of attachment for your hyoid bone, and the inferior horn articulates at the lateral articulating facets of your cricoid cartilage. The cricoid cartilage is the only complete ring, cartilaginous ring in your entire respiratory passageway. It has the posterior chordate lamina, serves as a point of attachment for the arytenoids. It has the anterior arc. It has the articulating facets, which serves as a point of attachment for the inferior horns of the thyroid cartilage. The cricoid cartilage articulates with the tracheal, first tracheal ring by means of the cricotracheal membrane. The next cartilage that we're going to talk about are the arytenoid cartilages. The arytenoid cartilages are paired cartilages that sits right on top of the cricoid cartilage, right on the posterior chordate lamina of the cricoid cartilage. Located on the superior, meaning up, posterolateral, posterior meaning back, and lateral to the side of the chordate lamina of the cricoid cartilage. This arytenoid cartilage has two processes. It has a vocal process and it has a muscular process. The vocal process, now if you can see here, if I were to consider these two structures right here as the vocal folds, okay, the vocal process is the point of attachment for these vocal folds on the arytenoid cartilage. Okay. Then you have a muscular portion, which is the point of attachment for muscles that articulate with the arytenoid cartilages. So the important thing to remember is your vocal folds, those two pearly white structures, have points of attachment to the vocal process on the arytenoid cartilage. Where does the anterior portion of your vocal folds attach? Right here. If you can see right here, that's in the inside, behind the thyroid notch to your thyroid cartilage. So your vocal folds sit between your anterior portion sits at the thyroid notch, and then posterior portion sits on the vocal process of your arytenoid cartilage. I really wish this was a classroom setup where you can actually take the model, look around and play with it, but we'll have to deal with how I'm showing it to you. Hopefully you are able to get a clearer understanding of the vocal process and the points of attachment for your vocal folds. Okay. What you see is the hyoid bone right here, the thyroid cartilage right here, the cricoid. And then the arytenoid sits right here on top of the cricoid. You see the vocal process right here, okay, and the muscular process right here. The vocal process is where your vocal folds attach. Okay, are we good so far? We've talked about the laryngeal framework, which has the hyoid bone. Then we talked about the thyroid cartilage, which is unpaired. The cricoid cartilage, which is unpaired. Thyroid is the largest of both the unpaired cartilages. Then we talked about one paired cartilage, which is the arytenoids. These are the three important cartilages because the joints that these cartilages form, the membranes and the ligaments that these cartilages have, are important for understanding the movement of the larynx in total. It talks about how we see pitch changes, how we see closing and opening of the vocal folds. Okay? All right. We're going to take a break here, and then I want you to review all of the material we've seen so far. We've talked about the laryngeal framework involving all those structures, and then I want you to come back and then we're going to talk about the laryngeal joints.